I think one of the things that we see when looking at, for example, the per pupil spending in cities like Baltimore and Detroit, and then comparing that with the outcomes of these schools, is the total exposure of the lie that more money for the education establishment and more money for the government schools is going to solve the problem. In fact, it will do nothing of the sort. Baltimore and Detroit both have some of the highest spending per pupil in the nation, and yet they have some of the worst scores in the nation. They have violence and drugs and crimes and shootings and gangs and terrible test scores, widespread illiteracy. I mean, it's a horror story what's happening in some of these schools, yet they have all this money. And every time parents get upset about what's happening in the schools, the education establishment, whether we're looking at the NEA, the teachers union, or the ivory tower professors or the people that run the education journal, they all say, well, we just need more money, right? If you just give us more money, everything will be fine. That is absolute nonsense. And looking at Detroit and Baltimore shows that conclusively. Now, America spends about $1 trillion on so-called education every year. This is really more than almost any other nation in the world on a per capita basis and on a de facto basis. And we have terrible education in this country. We have widespread illiteracy. I'll go back to that federal survey from the 90s. 55% of Americans read at the worst 2 levels. How can that be when we're spending $1 trillion a year on education? It doesn't make any sense until you realize that the system was designed to do precisely what it's doing. If we go back a little further, if we go back to the 80s, Ronald Reagan put together a commission, the National Commission on Excellence in Education. And bureaucracies are normally, and commissions, government bodies, they normally use pretty laid-back language. They don't want to upset the apple cart. But some of the stuff they wrote in this, it should have been setting off alarm bells all across the country. They said if a foreign power had imposed this educational quagmire on us, we would have viewed it as an act of war. So, that is really, really serious language. And what Sam and I argue is that we should have viewed it as an act of war, even though it wasn't foreigners who did it. Another thing that this commission said was that the education situation in this country is so bad that it threatens our future as a nation and as a people. So, if that doesn't grab your attention, I don't know what will. If our future as a nation and as a people is threatened by the education system, and this was in the 80s, mind you, the situation has declined a lot since then. The American people need to wake up because the end point here is not going to be pretty.